So will you talk now about what are the changes that we came out of COVID with?
Yep. So, oh gosh, there's a lot. So, the big one I just mentioned was the new income driven plan. That one is it's called SAVE, SAVE. That plan is taking over for what used to be called REPAY, revised pay as you earn. And basically the payment is cheaper, but the big deal with it as well is that it has a interest discount where let's say, your payment is not enough to cover the interest cost per month because it's based on income, then that accruing interest just usually would have gotten added to the balance and your balance would have just kept growing.
Right.
But Save waives any of the accruing interest. So the balance cannot grow on the save plan.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's really nice because I remember, I say we paid off our loans in 5 years, but really it was 6 because the entire first year we were we somehow
Interest.
at the end of year 1, it had gone up and we were just like, "Oh, I don't think we're paying enough attention to this."
Yeah.
Okay, so that won't happen anymore.
Yep.
So is Save the only IDR that's available for people, or are there options? Because I feel like I've seen just like newsletters and like things on Instagram being like, how to know which option to do.
Yeah, there's still options. There's 4 different income-driven plans. Save is probably going to be the cheapest for the majority of people, but it is not the best for everybody, which I think is important to note. So there's also a pay as you earn plan, PAYE. That's the 20-year timeline to forgiveness. Save is 25. So
Okay.
some folks might want to compare, do they care more about being done with the loan sooner or are they okay with the 25-year timeline for a cheaper payment? So we're doing a lot of comparisons between those two plans right now. Then there's income-based repayment or IBR, which is based on 15% of discretionary income. So less and less people that plan is going to make sense for. Same with
How come?
ICR. Just because it's more expensive than save or
And it's
pay.
still 20 years.
IBR is 25 if you have graduate
Oh,
loans. Yep. And it's 20. The new IBR plan is 20. So there's old IBR and new IBR to make it
do
a
you
little more
automatic?
confusing.
But no shit. I just need to let you know that I literally the acronyms are already messing with me because I literally just came out of a recording with a topic that couldn't be s- further from this. I just was talking to a chiropractic researcher and we were using she was using all of these like research terms of EBM so I'm like, okay, cool. I'm already lost, but I'm making notes. Are you automatically, if you were in the old IBR, are you automatically rolled into the new IBR?
So no, because the new IBR, you couldn't have had any loans borrowed before July of 2014. So
Okay.
this is for like new borrowers who like borrowed in the recent like past decade pretty much. Those that did not that borrowed a lot later than that, they would be on the old IBR. So
Okay.
that's what distinguishes the two for folks.
Okay. So
Mhm.
you had said save,
Mhm.
pay, IBR, and what's the fourth one you
ICR, income contingent repayment, which that one's the worst of them all. It's 20% of discretionary income. It exists. There's a few scenarios where it makes sense. Parent plus borrowers, like who borrow for their kids' undergraduate education, like that's the only income driven plan they have access to. But for a lot of folks, it's not relevant, and we're usually not recommending it for any reason.
Okay, so that's the worst one unless you're a parent plus situation, you're not using ICR.
Mhm. Right.
So then IBR is like the third worst. Who's doing that and why?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So
You're like, I don't know.
IBR, there's few circumstances, but there are very legitimate reasons to use IBR. Save, which is the newest, cheapest plan, does not have a payment cap. So the more and more your income is over time, the higher and higher your payment gets. IBR has somewhat of a payment cap where it can't go above a certain threshold. So for very high income earners that don't really make a lot of money early on, so like maybe think physicians or practice owners. This could be very relevant for practice owners where as an associate you don't make a lot and then as a practice owner you start making quite a bit more. If you have that big income jump, but you still want to do forgiveness, then IBR might make more sense because it has that limit to what the payment could go up to.
What is the limit?
It's based on taking the balance and spreading the payments out over 10 years, and you would pay the loan. So basically, it's a standard 10-year payoff amount for like what the payment would be to pay off the loans in 10 years.
Okay, so to figure out what your limit is, you would take the amount you owe and figure out what the
Mhm.
standard tenure would be, and they'll never make you
Mhm.
pay more than that.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Oh God, I'm like instantly taken back to the trauma of the first time that we recorded where I was sweating and it wasn't even
That's
my
true,
problem,
yeah.
but also math. Like I'm somebody who like I'll find my way. I'll be in a episode, and I'll be like, so for instance, if you see 200 people a week and you spend 5 minutes with each person, and I'm like on air going like, how many hours? Shit, why did I start doing math?
Yeah.
Okay. So can you do the math on, let's say that I owe
Mhm.
200,000.
Yeah.
What would like a 10-year payoff
Mhm.
be on that?
Mhm.
What would that monthly cap be?
200, so that would be about 2,300 a month.
Okay, so the cap would be 2,300 a month.
Mhm.
And how much money would I have to be making? I'm sorry if this is you just seem really smart with numbers. So it seems like how much money would I have to be making a year
Mhm.
where if I was in the SAVE program, I was having to give more than 2,300 a month?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. So let's back into that. So let's see. Save. So 2,300 is the cap. It would be, I think, about 350
So if
of
you
adjusted gross income.
which was
Um,
like a lot of money. That's
yeah.
that's
Actually, I think it's more like 325 or so. That would be around the limit. But yeah, so like adjusted gross income would have to be like pretty high in that scenario to get up to the cap, like 300 plus in that example. So a lot of people don't even need the cap. So that's why it's not super relevant to a lot of people. It's relevant to those that might have a smaller balance where the cap is a lot smaller.
Mhm.
And for those that do have a pretty big income jump in the future, like they're just crushing it. Like that's where it might make sense. But then the other benefit, so new IBR we talked about is 20 years. So for people who would value being done with loans in 20 years versus 25 from Save, then that might be a consideration too.
But
But
when you say people who would value being done,
mhm.
do you mean that from a monetary math perspective, or do you mean like they want to be done with this 5 years earlier?
Mhm. Both, because in a perfect world, the math works out better that we're done in 20 years and it's cheaper, but new IBR's payment is slightly higher than Save's payment. So you're paying slightly more per month for 20 years versus like a lower payment for 25 years. So we have to kind of run the math to see like, is it about the same or do you pay more because the payment's slightly more? So in a perfect world, it's cheaper both ways. It's cheaper because it's shorter and it's just cheaper from a total cost perspective. But sometimes the math, depending on your income and the balance, might shift more towards like the cheapest route is the 25-year plan, but you don't want to spend 25 years paying these. So you'd rather just pay a little bit more to be done sooner, if that makes sense.